Mina olen siis Heili Einasto, ma räägin homme, aga mul paluti siis tutvustada Karl Toepferit, minu head kolleegi San Jose ülikoolist, kellega me kohtusime ka Ella Ilbaku kaudu, ehk teisiti öeldes ta kirjutas mulle 10 aastat tagasi ja meie esimene kohtumine sai teoks täpselt 10 aastat tagasi, 12. oktoobril. Nii et nagu mingi aastapäev ka meie jaoks. Ja ta siis räägib tõepoolest siis seda, kuidas siis Ella Ilbaku kuvand tema elu on mõjutanud ja üldse siis nagu tantsimise kuvandist ehk teisiti öeldes pildid ja tants, mis on meile kui tantsuajaloolastele üks väga olulisi ajalooallikaid, aga peale selle veel ka needsamad pildid on mõjutanud väga tugevalt üldse seda, kuidas tantsust on aru saadud nende hulgas, kes seda konkreetset tantsu pole näinud. Ja ma arvan, et see toimib siiamaani, kuigi meil praegu on videod ja kõik muud, siis konkreetselt foto teeb midagi muud. Mainiksin ka seda, et Karl Toepferil on mitmed niisugused fotoprojektid, me oleme ka sellest natukene rääkinud siin varasematel mõnedel üritustel. Naiselikkuse mask oli meil ühel Tartu draamal, eks ju, rääkisime. Et jah, tal on nagu huvid laiemad kui ainult siis tants, aga tants ja teater on need, mis tõesti teda siis on paelunud. Ja hetkel töötab ta tegelikult Skaramuši projektiga ehk Sibeliuse Skaramuši lavastuse siis erinevad tõlgendused koos Soome uurija Eija, what's her second name? Eija Kurgiga. Nii et ühesõnaga ei ole ta oma püssi põõsasse visanud, mis siis, et on San Jose State sellelt riiklikul ülikooli emeriitprofessor. And now the floor is yours, Karl.
I'll speak of this. All right, well, I'll sit down. Thank you very much, Haley, and I want to thank Annalise and Annalie for all those who were involved in the organization. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I appreciate their efforts to organize this conference. And I'm just sorry I'm not able to speak in Estonian about Ella Ilbak and her contribution to early dance, modern dance photography. So anyway, I'll begin my paper here and try and get through as much of it as I can, because I think it's a little bigger than the time that I have allotted to me, but it'll be available in its complete form elsewhere. Images of dance often provoke greater curiosity about dance than dance performance itself. The history of early modern dance attracts enthusiasm primarily because of the photographic record of those who performed it. Let me give an example of how the image of a dancer not only changed my understanding of early modern dance history, even though I never saw her perform, and no one will ever see her perform. In the mid-1980s, when I began my academic career, my department assigned me to coordinate and teach graduate courses that included dance students, although I had almost no background in dance history or dance training. From the dance students, I learned that their knowledge of modern dance history focused entirely on the pioneers of American modern dance, and that their knowledge came not from images or text, but through oral transmission from their teachers in the studio. The graduate students wanted a larger idea of dance history. My enthusiasm for Pina Bausch's Tanztheater opened my awareness of the astonishing achievements of German modern dance, or Ausdruckstanz, during and after World War I. The Ausdruckstanz culture led me to wonder about early modern dance elsewhere in Europe. In 1988, I received a catalog from a company in Chicago that distributed books from the Soviet Union. The one title I ordered was Leah Tormas's Eesti Ballet, which is mostly a picture album of Estonian dance history from 1918 to 1984. Toimus's book gives a vivid pictorial history of Estonian dance across many decades of the 20th century, but the image that impressed me most was the first one, a photograph of Ella Ilbak performing her dance, The Flame, as Toimus captioned it, although some academics have contended, not persuasively, the photo depicts Ilbak's dance vision. The book implied that Estonian dance history began with Ella Ilbak. Toimus did not provide a date for the photo. Ilbak created The Flame in 1922. It became one of her most popular dance pieces and remained in her repertoire for decades. When Ilbak began her career as a dancer in 1918, modern dance manifested itself almost entirely as solo dance concerts, in which a single dancer performed a program of between 9 and 12 dances, displaying her versatility in relation to different moods, costumes, narrative structures, and kinetic personas. To promote their concerts, dancers made postcard photos of themselves in dance poses, and they distributed these photos through bookstores and magazine kiosks, and as publicity materials from newspapers and journals, which published the photos as decorative embellishments, even if the dancer was not performing in the vicinity of the journal's readership. A couple examples of these postcards. The vast European public understood modern dance through photos of dancers, not through dance performances. In these photos, female dancers assumed dance poses that made their bodies appear modern, insofar as the poses made them look bolder, less inhibited, or freer than women of the time generally allowed themselves to appear. Ilbak's photo for The Flame easily conveyed this message. In it, she is half naked, sitting on the floor while twisting her torso into a profile pose while undulating her arms upwards to simulate the movements of the flame. Her body glows voluptuously in the darkness that surrounds her. She projects an exotic Sibylline majesty. No other photo in Toimus's book casts such a distinctive aura. It conveyed the idea that a dance could happen without the movement of the feet, with only the movement of the torso, arms, and head. Ilbak anchored herself to the floor, and yet her upper body movements made her appear free without moving from her initial sitting position. Freedom did not depend on consuming or cutting through space. The flame of desire could ignite, consume, and wither in the body without moving the body from its initial position of incendiary ignition. The photo made me curious to know more about Ilbak and Estonian modern dance, but back in the late 1980s and 90s, finding information on those subjects was quite difficult in America. Through university loan, I obtained a copy of Ilbak's autobiography, published in Sweden in 1953. Reading it was a severe challenge when my access to Estonian language resources remained confined to an Estonian English dictionary published in the 1960s. The most interesting section of Ilbak's memoir at that time was her brief description of her friendship in St. Petersburg and Munich in the early 1920s with the German solo dancer Edith von Schrenk, who perhaps pursued an even more ambitious and imaginative aesthetic of solo dance than Ilbak, but whose artistry quickly decayed because of her tormented love affair with the German writer Waldemar Bonzols. That's a picture of Edith von Schrenk. Like Ilbak, Schrenk liked moving close to the performance surface and making dances while sitting on the floor. I referred to this passage in Ilbak's book when I discussed Edith von Schrenk in my book, Empire of Ecstasy. This was my first published reference to Ilbak, but I still knew very little about her. Indeed, her own memoir is mostly just an account of people she knew and places she visited, with very little information about her dances, or about her dance philosophy, or about herself. Meanwhile, other projects, including Empire of Ecstasy, left me with little time to cultivate my curiosity about Ella Ilbak. Nevertheless, the photo of the flame continued to haunt me, In the summer of 1995, I visited Estonia for the purpose of gathering information about Ilbak. I had no idea what I was doing, because I had no idea who to contact about Estonian dance in the 1920s. A German professor of literature recommended that I contact a dramaturg at the Vanemuine Theater in Tartu, but unfortunately, I cannot remember either of their names. I wrote a semi-literate letter in Estonian to the Tartu dramaturg, who agreed to meet with me. He showed me around the Vanemuine Theater. My letter in a terrible Estonian had moved him. He said he did not know any Russians who had bothered to learn a word of Estonian. We spoke German because he did not know English. He was unaware of Ella Ilbak, but he helped me get in touch with an Estonian theater historian in Tallinn, Lilian Karepi. She and I met at the Tallinn Music and Theater Museum. Here, communication was difficult because she did not know English and only a little bit of German. Well, I could say nothing intelligible in Estonian. This is whoops. They're going down.
All right. Sa tunned seda arvestust?
Oi. Let's go.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Tallinn, 1995. Okay, so Lilian Karepi guided me through the Ilbak material here in this museum. The archive seemed unusually small for such a prominent Estonian artist, but it did contain a couple of photographs in which Ilbak posed nude. The archive did not identify where or when the photos were made, or who took them, or how they came to reside in the museum's archive. No one informed me that Ella Ilbak was still alive and living in the United States. I enjoyed Estonia for many reasons other than Ella Ilbak, but I sensed that much of the information about her career was not in her native land. In bookstores, I found little monographs on Estonian actors of the 1920s and 1930s published in interbellum and Soviet times, including a couple published by Lilian Karepi. Ilbak was not a subject of any of these monographs, but neither were any of the other early modern Estonian dancers Tormes identified in her book. A new edition of Ilbak's autobiography appeared in 1990 with additional photos, but it did not inspire any scholarly inquiry into her life. Skip some of this. Information about her came in scraps. I was curious about Ilbak, curious about the woman in the startling photo of the flame, but I did not see her as a scholarly project. Knowledge of the Estonian language seemed necessary to attempt anything serious, and I did not see how I could learn it with the resources available to me. Only the advent of the internet in the late 1990s expanded my knowledge of Ilbak beyond what I had acquired through her autobiography and my visit to the Theater and Music Museum. Eventually, a clearer picture of her life emerged. Ilbak came from a prosperous upper-middle-class agricultural family in central Estonia. With her parents' encouragement, she studied plastic ballet with Claudia Shevchenko in St. Petersburg and Dalcroze pedagogy under Sergei Volkonsky in the same city. In Tartu, during World War I, she took lessons in free dance at the studio of Elmaris Parts, probably the first such studio in Estonia. Ilbak went to Paris, where she studied ballet with Maria Rutkoska, movement with the countercultural philosopher Raymond Duncan, and physical education with Georges Herbier. She gave her first dance concert in Tartu on 10 May 1918, which was unusual at least for two reasons. She used accompaniment by both piano and harp, and she published in Posthumes on the day of the concert a relatively lengthy theoretical essay on the goal of modern dance, which, she said, was to physicalize the emotions inspired by music, in contrast to ballet, in which music functions to, she said, smother and rape the body into a graceful puppet. Nearly a year later, she gave a concert in Tallinn. Here I got Elmarise Parrots. But she did not attempt any more concerts until she returned from her studies in Paris in 1922. After a concert in the Vanamoina Theater in Tartu, she performed in Estonia only occasionally. The great majority of her career occurred elsewhere. From Tartu, she went to Helsinki, then Munich, Budapest, Vienna, Paris, Stockholm, Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin, Warsaw, Sofia, Cairo, Jerusalem, and numerous other European cities. It is difficult to identify another European dancer of the interwar period who performed in so many cities and countries. Perhaps only the German solo modern dancer, Nidi Impakoven, performed in more countries, although she stopped performing after her world tour in 1934. There's Nidi Impakoven. Following her studies in Paris in 1921, Ilbak ceased to be a resident of Estonia and spent the rest of her life residing in many cities: Munich, Helsinki, Riga, Stockholm, Amsterdam, all over, until she spent the end of her life in the United States. Ilbak gave solo dance concerts long after modern dance. Around 1924, prioritized ensemble performance over solo performance, which was almost extinct by 1925. Unlike other modern dancers, she had no desire to teach, no interest in establishing a school, no wish to perform with an ensemble or company. Though she published 2 novels in addition to her memoirs, she wrote nothing about dance after her 1918 essay. Her only attempt at collaboration with the Dutch dancer Irel Gadiskov lasted just a few months. In her autobiography, she mentions many people she has met in her life, but the reader gets the impression that she was never close to anyone. Despite the intense eroticism of her dances and photos, she never discloses a single romantic feeling for anyone, except perhaps inadvertently in relation to Edith von Schrenk. She constantly changed accompanist and never sustained an enduring collaboration with any of them. Her most innovative period was from 1922 to 1925. After 1929, she performed the same dozen pieces for the rest of her career. She had no incentive for further innovation. She performed few dances with an ostensibly ethnic or national identity, such as her Hebrew dance, Salome, and Oriental moods like temple dance. But she never performed a dance with a specifically Estonian theme. Her career as a dancer was largely over by the outbreak of World War II, although she gave a few dance concerts from 1947 until her last one in 1966 at age of 72. But even before the war, no one was as old as her had performed solo modern dance concerts, and no one has since the war. Before 1939, photographers did not take pictures of Ella Ilbak during the performance of her dances in concerts or even under studio conditions. Rather, Ilbak assumed poses of movements in a studio environment. Cameras lacked the high-speed shutter technology to capture bodily movement without producing a very blurred image. Some photographers were able to capture unblurred images of dance movement on stages as early as 1918 or 1919. But for many solo dancers, photographing movement on stage meant renting a theater to accomplish this task, which could cost as much as to rent the space for a concert. Photographing posed movements in a photographer's studio was more efficient and just as effective in constructing the dancer's unique image. Dancers often posed in the costumes they wore for concert performances, but the main goal of the pose and the photograph was to show a movement, or more precisely, a bodily configuration peculiar to the dancer. Thus, dancers frequently assumed the same movement pose with different costumes. The purpose of a solo dance concert was to display a dancer's unique repertoire or spectrum of expressive movement. The purpose of a studio photo shoot was to extract from the dances a repertoire of spectrum of poses unique to the dancer. That sounds simple, yet it was not. Dancers could not rely on a single defining image to attract audiences or media attention. But building a repertoire of poses distinctive to the dancers became increasingly difficult in the early solo phase of modern dance history because as solo dancers proliferated, it became harder for audiences to differentiate them through movements and poses, causing dance photos to assume generic qualities that undermined their purpose in revealing uniqueness. All right, so there's the earliest photographs of Ella Ilbak. Ella Ilbak adapted easily to these conditions between 1923 and 1933. Her image repertoire included a wide range of poses, and the poses derived from specific movements for specific dances. She worked with different photographers in different countries to produce images, and she never developed a strong, enduring relationship with any photographer or any photography studio. The earliest available photograph of her shows her at the age of 15 or 16, probably a portrait for a high school yearbook. Here she demonstrates remarkable composure, with her face inviting the gaze of the photographer while projecting a measure of aloofness. However, it is very difficult to locate photographs of her in dance poses before 1922, although artists had done portraits of her around 1919, 1921, including this 1919 portrait by Ans Leikema. The artist has given Ilbak an unusually mature look and an aura of severity and even intimidating opacity or dark confinement, qualities not associated with her dance aesthetic. The first photo depictions of Ilbak as a dancer were facial portraits taken in late 1921 prior to her first concert in Helsinki in January 1922, apparently under the assumption that newspaper readers became interested in a dancer because of her face than because of a dance-like pose. Based on these photos, the Hungarian artist Andrei Komáromi-Kás painted her portrait under circumstances that remain unknown. Presumably, the idea behind the painting was to transform the image of Ilbak's face into an artwork that elevated her status as an artist in a way that a photo could not. So here's this painting. But it is not clear why or for whom Komáromi-Kás painted the portrait. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, Ilbak continued to place great importance on glamorous facial photos to sell her identity as a dancer, despite or perhaps even because of complaints by some critics that in her dances she did not vary her facial expressions enough. Yet she did not update her facial portraits until about a decade later, when she had two different Viennese photographers produce portraits of her. In 1929, she produced a set of photo portraits in the Vienna studio of Georg Feyer, in which she experimented with a backlit halo effect to dramatize a variety of facial expression. While the photos are quite striking in revealing the luminous power of her face, Ilbak evidently found them unsatisfactory because she did not use them much, if at all. Sometime between 1930 and 1931, she collaborated with the Viennese photographer Greta Kollner to produce a new set of photo portraits. Kollner produced numerous photos of dancers, including in 1930, Ilbak's friend and former classmate, Edith von Schrenk. Kollner avoided the soft-focus chiaroscuro aesthetic adopted by Feyer and favored a sharp-focused, shadowless, gleaming view of the many dancers that Kulliner photographed. Ilbak preferred these images and used them throughout the 1930s to promote her concerts, although they convey a much more melancholy aura than the Fair set. In the late 1920s, here's another one. In the late 1930s, Ilbak attempted another photo portrait with a backlit chiaroscuro effect with an unknown photographer, this time in profile. But she seems not to have used it for any promotional purpose. The photo conceals more than it reveals, and her fussy, overly complicated blouse does not flatter her and makes her appear too old. However, Fair remained the photographer for perhaps her most famous and beautiful portrait, made in late 1929. It was the cover photo for a Finnish magazine. Here, Fair's distinctive backlighting and chiaroscuro approach to portraiture achieve a powerfully enigmatic effect. She appears less melancholy than in the Kulliner photos and more certain of her identity than in the 1929 Fair set. She looks at once inviting and yet reserved, mysteriously shadowed. Her face exudes confidence, worldly sophistication and intensity of gaze, with her eyes focused on something beyond, something greater than the darkness that surrounds her. Ilbak paid considerable attention to her hairstyling, and in 1931 she even won a hairstyling contest in Vienna. Reviewers sometimes commented on her Nordic blondness and the modern complexity of her short, rippling haircuts. But the portrait photos do not bring out her blondness. Rather, they give her dark hair a strange, lustrous sheen. And here's the cover. Ilbak's face attracted the attention of fine artists, but it's surprising that artists preferred to depict her face rather than her dancing. Unlike numerous other modern artists who depicted modern dancers in performance, such as Dutch artist Jan Slijvter's 1921 painting of German modern dancer Gertrude Leistikow. Fine art representations of Ilbak dancing or even of her beautiful body did not emerge. Her face dominates the artist's vision. This exclusive focus on facial portraiture may have to do with confirming the dancer's status as an artist. In her autobiography, Ilbak constantly refers to her meetings and interactions with socially prominent and upper-class persons. In the elite cultural circles in which she circulated, fine art facial portraits could establish the subject as a person of high social status, unlike pictures that depicted the same person performing work or engaged in professional activity. However, it is not known for whom these portraits were produced when Ilbak never seems to have owned them. So we have some of these portraits. And here's a picture of her with her society friends in Budapest. But Ilbak's career as a dancer required that she make photos of herself in dance poses. From the beginning of her career, commentators remarked that her dances relied heavily on the expressive use of her torso, arms, hands, and head, not her legs. And like most other dancers, her movements did not consume a great amount of performance space. Her movement was sculptural, suffused with athletic plasticity, yet more lyrical than dramatic in emotional construction. She avoided displays of acrobatic virtuosity and did not devise complex movements to demonstrate a superior control over her body. She liked making movements low to the performance surface. She saw movement as arising from the ground rather than as a struggle against the oppressive power of gravity. In some of her dances, most famously in The Flame, she did not even stand up, but performed all of her movements with her upper body while sitting or even lying on the floor. In the earliest dance photos of her, she emphasized her movement, her affinity for movement close to the performance surface. She made these photos with an unknown photographer at the Clio photography studio in Riga in 1921. The reason Ilbak did her dance photos in Riga and produced her first concert since her Parisian studies in Helsinki is probably due to the political controversy in Estonia that resulted from the Estonian government giving her a grant to study in Paris. According to an article by Riikka Korpi-Tuomola, social democrats in the Estonian parliament questioned the government spending money on Ilbak's Paris education when the state did not have enough money to pay for school teachers in Estonia. Ilbak may have believed that she would avoid political controversy by organizing and self-financing her post-Paris concert in Finland, although the Estonian diplomatic corps assisted her in setting up the concert. Governments invest in artistic education abroad in the hope that the education will return exceptional benefits for the artist's homeland. But Ilbak may have assumed, because of negative feeling about her stirred up by the Social Democrats, that she needed an enthusiastic response to her dancing from a foreign audience before she could set up a concert in Estonia. The Riga dance poses strongly emphasize Ilbak's closeness to the performance surface. The Clio studio made photos of her performing more conventional dance poses. Here's another. But these are dull compared to the photos of her low to the floor or reclining. She perhaps released them as postcards, but not as publicity material. Okay. Oh, this one.
So this way, yeah. If you go with them, it goes also.
All right, maybe I should stick there. Okay. All right, these are the dull ones. These are dull compared to the photos of her low to the floor or reclining. The Riga studio made photos of her posing in a costume other than a chiton, but these have disappeared except for what newspapers published in 1922. Ilbak liked posing in a skimpy white chiton that showed off her bare arms, legs, and thighs, and it's possible that she performed most of her dances in a white chiton, which adapted well to a variety of moods. Unlike other dances, she did not wear tights, tutus, pants of any sort, or flamboyant dresses, nor did she employ accessories like capes, hats, gloves, or masks. In spite of Fayer's mysterious 1929 chiaroscuro portrait of her, she avoided posing or dancing in dark garments. None of her photos show her using any props. The white chiton remained her default costume for displaying bodily movement, although, as will be evident, she revised and perfected the chiton design in relation to new interactions with photographers. Ilbak was aware that the Riga photos lacked glamour and sophistication, even if the Finnish press found them helpful in reporting on her debut concert in Helsinki. In March 1923, she went to Paris to give a concert at the Champs-Élysées Theatre, which received an enthusiastic response. but I have found no evidence yet of the Parisian press publishing any photos of her in relation to this event. Although a Finnish newspaper reported that she planned to perform a concert in Monte Carlo after a Parisian engagement, evidence of further performances in 1923 have yet to emerge. She made the Riga photos when she gave a concert in the city in December 1921. Most likely she made the photos there rather than in Tallinn because she wanted to create erotically charged images of herself and felt she would further complicate her relations with public officials in Estonia if word leaked out of a Tallinn photo studio that she was using photography to construct a voluptuous identity. When she performed in Tallinn in April 1922, the journal Egg published an unenthusiastic review of her concert by the drama critic and theater director Valdemar Mittas. The editor of the journal appended to the review a statement claiming that Egg wanted to publish photos of Ilbak, but that she forbade the journal to publish them because of the review. The editor asserted that criticism does not always mean paying compliments. However, none of the other Estonian newspapers that covered her performance published photographs of her, even though they published very favorable reviews of it. And even though the Finnish press had already published a few of the Riga photos. Ilbak's own ambivalence toward the Riga photos may explain her absence from the stage for so long after the Paris performance. She needed a stronger image of herself in the media to attract wider public interest in her art. In 1924, she went to Stockholm to launch a tour of Sweden. There she engaged the services of Henry Goodwin, a master photographer highly esteemed for his dramatic portraits of performing artists. Goodwin created some of the most glamorous and enduring images of Ilbak, and his photos of her dominated publicity about her throughout the 1920s. No other photographer was as successful as him in capturing her as a dancer, and he was responsible for the most famous image of her performing the flame. Back to the flame. One of his photographs of her, not in the Moderne Musik collection, appeared in the New York Fashion Arts and Society magazine Vanity Fair in 1927. The only place you will see this photograph is in this old magazine. Goodwin, too, relied on chiaroscuro lighting, but avoided backlighting. He set Ilbak against a dark background, but bathed her body in a soft light that made her skin glow and made her shadowless body the source of light within darkness. This technique was not unique to his Ilbak photos. He applied it to many photos of other performing artists, such as the dancer Vera Folkina in 1918. Yes. Vera Folkina on the right. But Ilbak was unique for the extent to which she exposed her flesh and brazenly assumed erotically charged poses. In several of the photos, including the flame, she posed with her eyes closed, as if to signify a state of rapture. In most of her subsequent dance photos with other photographers, she posed with eyes closed. Except for a few poses in her white chiton, Ilbak posed for Goodwin in variations of her scanty, exotic, or oriental dance costume. Let me go through. Goodwin was very skillful in capturing a feeling of movement in Ilbak's poses, something which she did not achieve in her subsequent collaborations with other photographers, where she emphasized a meditative stillness or a sculptured, statuesque quality to her poses. She never seems more relaxed than in the photos Goodwin took of her. Some more of her. He also photographed her attachment to the performance service in a more dramatic manner than other photographers. Most of the many Salome dancers of the early 20th century preferred photos of themselves performing a wild or flamboyant movement, such as Danish Finnish dancer Edith von Bonsdorf. This is more Goodwin photos. And here is Edith von Bonsdorf with her Salome. However, for Goodwin, Ilbak presented Salome reclining languidly on a tapestry-draped platform, propping her chin on her hand. That's Ilbak's Salome. With her eyes open, gazing at the viewer as if studying something to determine whether it should interest her. Despite her nearly complete nudity and supine pose, she does not convey any serious sense of vulnerability. The viewer sees her in a vaguely intimidating aura of self-composure. And then the next. Goodwin did a beautiful portrait of Ilbak employing a hand-propping chin pose similar to her Salome gaze, and apparently without wearing any clothes. But she appears not to have used the portrait for any publicity purpose. Goodwin was known internationally for his suave, elegant, and dramatic photos of nude women. It is quite possible that Ilbak's body was the subject of Goodwin's torso photo. Ilbak wanted nude photos of herself because she posed nude in an unidentified studio in the mid-1920s. Goodwin did not take the photos, and it is not known how two nude photos of her in the unknown studio ended up in the archive of the Estonian Theatre and Music Museum. The photos are crudely made with poor lighting, clumsy decor, awkward framing, and a desperate effort to generate enough light by posing before a large industrial-type window. The pictures were most likely an experiment or test contrived out of curiosity and in collaboration with a trusted amateur. However, Ilbak made photos with another studio in 1924, possibly before she worked with Goodwin. The studio has not been identified, but with this studio, Ilbak produced the most dance-like images of herself she ever made, including the only known photo of her making a leap for her dance Caprice. Finnish newspapers published photos from this set in 1924, and the photos appeared in subsequent years in Swedish and Hungarian newspapers. The other set. But the photo series lacks the glamour and dramatic intensity of her work with Goodwin. The minimalist studio environment resembles that used by Greta Kollner in Vienna, but the photographic style does not, even compared with Kollner's work around 1924. The photographer places Ilbak's movement against a white backdrop that undermines the idea of light emanating from her body. Her face lacks sufficient definition, and neither she nor the photographer can seem to imagine her dancing on her feet without her arms raised over her head. On her feet with this photographer, she can only communicate exuberance and exaltation. Only in the last photo of the series here, with Ilbak kneeling, casting a shadow from a spotlight and creating a chiaroscuro effect, is there facial clarity and dramatic mystery. And So I'll just go through these. I have how many minutes left? 10? Okay. In 1928, Ilbak worked with another studio that so far I cannot identify. None of these photos were published. They lack technical sophistication. Greater focal clarity would require more expert lighting. But in these photos, it appears that Ilbak and her Kaitan wanted to revive some of the peculiar erotic charge of her Riga Kaitan photos. These photos exude a clandestine underground quality, as if Ilbak wanted to see herself in the Kaitan in a way that the public never would, a vaguely pornographic goal, and for this they remain fascinating. 10 years later, in 1938, there's another one of the things. 10 years later, in 1938, she worked with the same studio to produce a striking profile portrait in the same unfocused style, with her head turned away from the viewer and her gaze uplifted towards some higher object of interest, creating a vaguely aristocratic aura. Most likely, she made these photos in a Budapest studio. I still have a lot to go here, but I think I'll just go to the conclusion, because
But you had also those other Swedish photos
Moisha Benkov, yeah. She had different photographers. This one was in Hungary. Paul Funk, very glamorous, glitzy stuff, but that archive has disappeared completely, apparently destroyed during World War II. So we don't really have more than these photos that have been published in Hungarian magazines. And this is another photo from Fayer studio, and this Fayer again in this kind of folkloric costume, which was turned into an advertisement for cream in Finland with Ella Ilbak's endorsement. And she worked with the Finnish photographer, Aratena, well, this is Greta Koliner. And Moise Benko did this kind of nude work with models in Stockholm, and he then photographed Ilbak in a way that I find unsatisfying. This does not really work for her, and that's why she went on to work with Tenho Vaara in Helsinki, and he had a much better or more satisfactory approach to her image. Her Hebrew dance on the floor, and this mysterious image of her. And these are the last photos. Ugh. Yeah. Done by Anna Rivkin in Stockholm, 1948, and not good. Why she was allowed to perform in this, I'll close with this image of her, probably taken in Budapest. But the main thing is, she has a very encompassing career. And it took me 35 years to get this far, and you have to visit so many archives in different countries, in Canada, Sweden, Estonia, and it's a very complex matter to understand the image of the dancer across time and in relation to different cultures. But it was all started by one image in Leah Tormas's book that got me going, and an image of a dancer can carry one a long way in this world. So Anyway, I guess I've said enough. I'm kind of exhausted. I didn't realize it's going to be quite as intense. But there's a lot left. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get it, and it'll be published or posted online, the whole thing. And thank you very, very much